jerseys and woolly socks. Now, football is meaningless, but it is magnificently meaningless. Those are the words of my next guest, and it encapsulates the debate that is raging about the Premier League. When should elite football in England restart? And how important is it in the grand scheme of things anyway? Football bosses will try to agree a plan at a crunch meeting tomorrow, and one of the people in the room, virtually of course, will be Steve Parish, chairman of Crystal Palace Football Club. Steve Parish, welcome. Just tell us a little bit about the importance of this meeting tomorrow.
Well, it's another part of the journey of trying to get football back. I mean, to answer your first question, football is entirely unimportant in the context of the public health crisis, and everything we do, that has to come first. But we're a business at the end of the day, and we support jobs and taxes and the economy. And we would be derelict in our duty if we didn't find a way to try and bring the game back. Now, it may prove beyond us. Obviously, we have huge challenges in order to get it back to complete this season, but we're planning to do so, and hopefully we have the German example going on now. They're successful. That could provide a blueprint for us. Hopefully we can manage to do it, but we have to see what the situation is at the time.
Well, you say the Germans have been successful, but Dynamo Dresden had one single case of COVID-19, and they've had to isolate their entire team and pull out of the German league immediately. So that just shows how vulnerable, how fragile going back is going to be.
Yes, no, I didn't say it's been successful. We're hoping it's successful.
All right.
And they can provide a blueprint. Clearly, we can see some of the early challenges. They may prove insurmountable, Andrew, but the concern for us, of course, is if they prove insurmountable now, then we may be in for a very, very extended period of not being able to play. And that has huge ramifications, obviously, for the game.
Now, we're obviously talking about the game restarting without the crowds, but nonetheless, if you are in the lower part of the league and you're worried about relegation, then this idea of playing on a neutral ground may feel very difficult for you. Lots of the clubs have protested about this because there is a well-documented home ground advantage, and if you're at the bottom of the league, to lose that advantage means you might be relegated, and that is going to be the big issue. So can I ask you whether you would compromise on the idea of all games being played in neutral grounds, allow some home ground advantage to get the league back to finish the season?
Well, it's certainly not my proposal that we play in neutral grounds. It's obviously on the grounds of public safety. One of the other issues we've got, along with player safety, which is paramount to staff safety, are crowds gathering outside stadia. The police at the moment have made it clear that they don't think that they can police every ground. Clearly, it's suboptimal, the whole thing. The moment the season stopped, the competitive integrity was breached. We will be going back to something that looks like our least worst option of playing. But all of those things, if we can get the game on, for me, are far better than discussing points per game or any of the other things that we may have to do in order to decide the end of the season. So deciding it competitively would be best. Obviously, if we can play in our own stadiums, that would be preferable for everybody. But at the moment, that situation is with government and with the authorities and isn't with us.
Well, Crystal Palace is in the happy position, of course, of being mid-table at the moment, but Scott Duxbury, who's chief executive of Watford, said recently, "We're being asked to finish a competition that bears no resemblance to the one we started, which could end in a small club like Watford's time in the Premier League. Is this fair? Does it have any semblance of sporting integrity? Of course not."
Well, listen, we are not entirely safe from relegation, although it would take a confluence of events for us to be relegated, but it has happened. And I have enormous sympathy with Scott's position. Having said that, as I said, I think it may well prove to be the least worst option, because if we stop, and because the decision has to be taken that the end of the season was when we played the last game, that would be equally hugely unfair to the three clubs that are currently in the bottom of the division. So there are no easy answers. We have to work through it as a collective, and I think we will, and we'll come out with a consensus in the end.
Sergio Aguero, the Manchester City striker, has said that many players are simply scared of playing again. What would be your response if one of your players said, "Do you know what? I don't want to play, I'm too worried"?
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to talk them through the risks. We need to make sure that they understand it. Equally, the players that currently do want to play, they need to fully understand what risks there are. We believe, the doctors believe, that in the round we can make the environment one of the, if not the safest workplaces. But if a player really doesn't want to play, then I can't imagine any circumstances where we would make a player play, and we have to take all that into account.
Yeah. Okay. It's been estimated that to get the Premier League up and playing again would require 40,000 tests for players and staff and ground staff and all the rest of it. Are you convinced that 40,000 tests for football, and therefore those tests not being available necessarily for all NHS or care home frontline workers, is that a good use of resources, do you think, for the country?
Well, we will want assurances as clubs that we're not taking resources away from anybody. We absolutely must not do that. We've been told so far that these are private facilities that aren't being utilised for this particular public health crisis. We will obviously all want more clarity on that, and it's absolutely essential that that isn't the case, Andrew. We simply can't take tests away from anybody that's more needing than us.
Is it possible, do you think, that if the season can't be restarted and Premier League football just stays on the ice, as it were, we could see big clubs as well as small clubs going bust?
Well, we're not quite at the stage of going bust. One would hope that we could get football back in some way before the end of the year. But these challenges, as you're speaking about on your show, they do not seem, as much as we would all wish it, to be likely to go away anytime soon. So obviously it's a threat. We're essentially an events-based business with mass gatherings. So we are probably a long way down the track of an industry that can naturally get back to our normal state. So the TV companies and the broadcasters we have here are very supportive, but around the world, there are different challenges for our broadcast partners. We know we'll be damaged coming out of this financially because obviously we have no crowds, we have no match day revenue. That will go on for a long time. It's really about damage limitation and seeing what we can salvage. And hopefully we can get to a point where certainly no Premier League club is in that situation. But I think down the leagues where the gates and all of that kind of income is 50% of the money, things will get very critical very quickly.
It's one heck of a job. Steve Parish, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Okay.